This is a Religica production. RELIGICA.
I'm the first woman to be a pastor in the family tree.
In your family?
In my family.
Dating back how many years?
Hundreds. So actually the church I was raised in was the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, and they don't ordain women. So kind of opened the door for me. I never even saw a female pastor until I was in my 20s.
So is being a pastor who's a woman 500 years after the Reformation, on the one hand...
Too slow.
Yeah.
Too slow to catch up with. In the church, there's been this prevalent message about our greatest sin is our ego, right? Our greatest sin is thinking that we're better than God. That's a very male-centric understanding of sin. And
How so?
Because often in our patriarchal society, my sin is not thinking too much of myself. My sin is thinking too little of myself. And without women pastors to share that this is part of the human experience too, I think that's been lost in the church. So there was always this, you are a bad person. And actually, many of us, men and women, actually need to hear this message. You are a beloved person. You are a wonderfully made person. You are capable. I think that's one value of women in ministry that we kind of bring.
Is the church glacial?
Yes. Sometimes I think the church works too hard to preserve itself and forgets the purpose, which is actually not the church. The purpose is love. When our focus becomes the institution itself, then we completely lose sight of what we're doing here and the people and the work that matters.
Why is bread so important in your religious tradition?
The basic human need is to be fed, to have nourishment. I think the reason Jesus talks about bread is because it's easy for us to grasp onto this scientific understanding. We all need food to live. And Jesus, by talking about bread and himself as bread and love and goodness as bread, is saying we don't just need food to live, but we actually need something more. To live the kind of abundant life that God has in mind for people, we need to be filled up with hope and with love and with forgiveness that spiritually feed us. Just living is not enough for God. Justice. That's why God is so concerned about justice.
When you're standing in front of a congregation and delivering a message on a Sunday morning, is your fear that the story of hope you're talking about has become more remote for all of us? Yeah.
So when I preach, I make sure that I'm preaching to myself.
Okay.
And that sounds a little self-centered, but I think if this doesn't matter to me, if it doesn't hit me in the gut, like it doesn't matter for anyone. When I read the scripture, I think first, how is this hitting me?
Okay.
And one of the stories I was talking about on Sunday is the story of Elijah, who sits down and wants to die. He's been tasked with speaking truth to power. He's got this evil king who's corrupt and hurting people, essentially just a violent guy. And God tells Elijah to bring the truth. And even though Elijah has been helped by God through this whole journey, he knows that they want to kill him, and he's scared, like rightfully, just terrified about his death. And so he sits down under a tree and he's like, God, just please kill me now. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know what's next, and I would rather die than see what happens next. Every time I read that, it resonated with me.
What is it? What's happening there?
I know I've been in that place of just not wanting to go on, not wanting to face the next thing. In my own life, actually, one of the reasons I am a pastor is because I dealt with depression early on in my youth, and even suicide. So I literally have been there where I felt like I want to die. And I've known so many people who've been in that place.
When we feel like we're in a place of desolation, what does hope do to us after that?
I think when we're in a place of desolation, we don't see an easy way out. What we need is to know that it's not all up to us, not totally on our shoulders. We are not alone. And there is a way out. And it might be that I can't get myself out of this, but somebody else can help me. And God can provide community and resources and a way forward. And I think even if you're not a person who's experienced depression or suicide or the extreme of that, literally wanting to die, we can all relate to feeling that way. I mean, I'm a person who feels like it's so important to know what's going on in the world. And so I try to engage. I try to know what's going on and read different news sources and pay attention. And sometimes there are days when the news is so painful. And then we tend to want to just retreat from it, which is actually not really helpful to the world or to ourselves. I think that's the temptation, is to say, this is too hard. This moment in our history, this conflict in our country, that's too much, and I'd rather disengage.
When we encounter mystery in our lives across religions, there are plenty of times we can think of in our shared humanity where we say, it is enough mystery, it's enough God. I can be afraid of something I can see, but that's different from having fear about the thing I can't see, which we might call dread today. Is it a certain kind of fear we're encountering about what's happening in the world?
Yes. It usually comes down to a lack of control, right? I can't control what's going to happen next. And we work so hard to try to change the outcome of the future. And sometimes we can't. I can't fix this, so I don't know what to do. And I think that's why we need more than ourselves. That's why we need, spirituality or religion, community, God, to feed us something different than just our own selves.
We live in a world where people feel pretty narrow in terms of what they care about right now. But you're talking about a community here that is drawn together around a shared message of hope and outward facing into the world.
Right.
And you see that every week here.
I see it here, but I also see it in other faith communities. I actually think that's exactly what we have in common with our Jewish and Muslim brothers and sisters. We all actually share this understanding.
No single religion is a destination. If religion is the conduit, where is it taking us?
It's taking us back out into the world. It's drawing us actually exactly closer to those hard places where there's need in the world. We can do hard things. Whether you're 5 years old and you can't ride a bike, or whether you're 14 years old and you have messed up socially and everybody's making fun of you, or whether you're an adult and you are struggling at work with your colleagues, or you're looking at the news, whatever it is, we can do hard things. We can face the future, but we can't do it on an empty stomach. If we're filled with hate and angst and anxiety, it's really hard to move forward. And it also destroys communities. I think that gratitude is probably one of the most nutritious foods we can eat, right? One of the best. Because gratitude turns everything around. You could go home every night and complain to your spouse. But if we turn that and we say, that's one of the things you say at the end of the day, what am I grateful for? Oh man, if you have to ask yourself that question, that's good for us. So we need more of that. And if other people are brave and if other people can do hard things, I can also do hard things.
Some of the superhero movies that we've seen, Avengers, these other, where everyone has to be bulletproof, made of Teflon, to be courageous, to be strong, to respond to fear, all that. But that's not what you're saying. You're talking about the power of gratitude, or the power of courage to face the difficult or hard thing.
Being able to share our common humanity, our common struggle. That's how we share.
What does beloved, as you've mentioned it, mean for you?
God took the time and the moment to create you, that God formed. And I mean, in the same way that I love my children, I know that God loves all of us.
There's someone listening out there who's lost a child.
It's one of the hardest things in the world. This is one of those things we say, it's enough. It's too much, God, right? When especially children are lost. But I believe at my core that God weeps with us, and that God's intent is for life and wholeness. I don't for 1 second ever believe that God's plan is death. God weeps with us over loss of life and promises to be with us in it. I mean, the Bible is full of lament, and there's a place for that. There's a place for lament.
What does God want from that young parent? What does God want?
There's a time for grief. There's a time to be in that pit, but never to be alone. purpose. I feel very accountable to the people who are hearing. People are hearing these things and they deserve to have a pastor who will talk about it. I hate church that's disconnected from reality and truth.
There's nothing redeeming about shame, is there?
Shame is it's not the same as guilt. Like,
What's the difference?
I think when we're guilty, when we've done something wrong, that there's a place for guilt. Guilt is a natural corrective.
Okay.
If you've done something wrong,
Yeah.
and you're experiencing guilt, like you might feel like a low life, like you're crawling in on your belly, but you can work past that. You can make amends for something you're guilty of. Shame. So shame is about not did I do something wrong, but I am wrong. It's very close to the heart. Shame it's corrosive. It eats away at us instead of feeding us.
It's a bit of a ghost.
Yeah.
Shame can haunt us.
So it's one of those lies
Yeah.
that the world is trying to feed us
Yeah.
because, man, you can control. If you want to, you can really control someone who's experiencing shame, right? And that's why people get stuck in abusive relationships and in abusive situations because they feel that they don't deserve more.
Shame can get inside of us and destroy our own internal voice that says you can do it.
Yeah.
Shame,
anxiety.
Yeah. Shame-based anxiety, right? Which
Yes.
has its own-
Which is like, I
that
can't.
shows up in adulthood. Like, I'm not good enough to do
Totally.
this thing because someone told me when I was 10
Yeah.
how wretched I
So
was.
now that I have to do it, I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
Because I'm going
and
to
I'm
screw
feeling
it up.
heart palpitations and all that, just
Yep.
for no other reason except the phantasm of someone who said something 30
Yeah.
years ago.
It's true. It's a lie. Shame is a lie. We have to fight against shame. It's not true. But the opposite of that is hearing God say, "You are my child. You are beloved. I love you. You are loved." Like, that is the opposite of shame.
This podcast was made possible by Religica Allies.